So this afternoon, I'm very lucky to be with James Miller. James is a fantastic guy, fantastic talent, as you'll hear through the interview. He's very humble, bless him, with that smile. He's the executive producer and host of the nationally broadcasted and syndicated radio show in America, James Miller Lifeology. He is also a licensed psychotherapist who's been in the mental health field for over 20 years. So just on that alone, he's got a lot to add around mental health, right? Which is fantastic. After 13 years in private practice, James left his successful practice in Washington, D.C. area to follow his own dreams, where he's since created James Miller Lifeology, where he globally helps people simplify and transform their spirit, mind, and body. So thank you so much, James, for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. Please tell us a bit more about yourself and your background.
Yes, of course. Well, first off, thank you, Daryl. I appreciate you allowing me to be in your show today. So my background, just like you said, I've been a licensed psychotherapist for so many years. I've been blessed to work in every environment possible. I was an adjunct professor. I've worked in prisons. My background as well in not only psychotherapy, but it's also, I did a lot of forensics as well. So one part of my practice is a psychotherapy. The other part is subject matter expert in the courts. I would determine if people are, if a sanity evaluation was needed, a risk assessment, competency evaluation. So I did a lot of stuff in my practice, but just like you said, I felt like I kind of maxed out everything in my life down there. And so what I decided was what was the next iteration of my life? What would that look like? And so what I did was I took all of my background and my different talents and I combined them together and I created Lifeology. And so with that, my goal was to be location independent. I wanted to do whatever it was I wanted to do, wherever it was. And so I took some time off, came down here to sunny Florida, and I started Lifeology, and I've been so blessed at how it's just kind of taken off.
Brilliant, James. So you obviously, in a mastery way, you saw coronavirus well in advance and built a business and a lifestyle that wouldn't be too affected, touch wood.
Well, yeah, it's obviously unfortunate, but yes, I've been blessed in that respect. That I was already in a virtual world and was able to continue to have my practice and my work, and thankfully, it's not been affected.
Yeah, wow, fantastic, James. I'm from following your work personally for a while now. You know, it's been inspiring and amazing to see what you do and how you help people. So my next question to you really is, what does mental health mean to you, and why should everyone watching and listening, why should they do more about it?
That's a great question. For me, mental health is just simply the ability to slow down and ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is happening in my life, which is influencing me to make certain decisions? A lot of times people think mental health, specifically when it comes to media, that you have to present in a way that is incredibly manic or depressed, suicidal. And that is an extreme version of it. And that's something that's very important to look at. But people don't realize that we all have life events. The way in which we understand the world around us determines how healthy we are. So in the psychology, we teach that whatever you perceive to be true, in other words, what I think about determines what I feel. What I feel determines how my body responds to that. So that's why I always like to help people create a buffer to say, okay, I'm looking at something, I'm perceiving something, and if all of a sudden I find that I'm overreacting or underreacting, obviously there's something that's affecting how I'm really looking at this. So for me, mental health, it comes back to the ability to slow down and simply ask yourself, am I perceiving what's happening as what's truly happening? Or am I using what's called a cognitive filter, or my thinking error, rather? That's kind of like a lens that we put over our thought structure, which kind of skews what's happening. So mental health itself is just the ability to be aware of what my perception is, which determines what I feel, which determines what I do. And so that's something we all, doesn't matter how successful you are or how unsuccessful you are, that's something we all have that in common. And so the more ability we have to recognize that and to be aware of that, the more successful and more self-developed we will be.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, James. Well, thinking about a lot of the business leaders and other working adults in both yours and my communities, our networks, how can these business leaders and working adults do more to support mental being, not just for themselves, but in others around them that might be going through some hard times and might be struggling?
Right now, as leaders themselves, it's important to create an environment where people just feel encouraged, they feel supported. A lot of times, for right now, we're really limited on what we can physically do. But when we come from a place of an interpersonal effectiveness, or a place of joining on a foundational level, it helps people feel more confident. So as a leader, our job is to create structure, security, appreciation. So simple things is just simply reaching out to your staff on a one-on-one basis, if you're able to do that, or continually just encouraging them and letting them know that you're there for them. Because as currently right now, since the world is quarantined, people feel very isolated. And so as a leader, it's so important to create some type of connection. And that can be an emotional standpoint of just simply asking them, how are you doing today? I thought about you today. You're on my mind today. This is something, as a company, as a culture, we really want to create a familial bond. And so right now, as people are struggling, a simple statement like that can help people really connect them to say, wow, once this is over, my boss or my leader, whomever it was really there for me, even in the smallest way. But it's important that they know that you are there for them in any way that you can be.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, James. Something just extends that conversation, I guess. Mm-hmm. Something that I'm a big fan of is what I call is authentic leadership. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is, as a leader, we need to be strong and we need to inspire and motivate others. But also, mm-hmm. it's okay for us as leaders and anyone to not be okay all the time. And it's really hard to be happy 100% of the time. So for me as well, part of what we need to do as leaders is actually being honest about when we are having some tough times or a down day. And if those that report to us, those that are in our communities, if they see us being like that, it helps them feel more like it's okay to not be okay and to talk about it. How do you feel about that, James?
I agree with that. And I would take it one step further. The more authentic we are, obviously, the more real we are. One thing as a leader, and like I said, to piggyback off what you're saying, when you show that you are struggling, you're overwhelmed, the second part of that is you want to say, and this is what I did to help myself. So in the moment, if they see that you're struggling, it's important to take responsibility, say, you know what, I'm really struggling right now. However, this is what I historically have done to help me through that. So we want to take it from a two-step process of the authenticity of being open and honest. But the second part is leading them in ways in which they can move beyond what they're feeling. So therefore, you're authentic, but you're also still leading them to find a healthy, productive response for them.
Fantastic. Completely agree with you on that one, James. Thank you for sharing again. Now, this could be an interesting one. Are there any good or bad experience of mental health that you'd be comfortable sharing with us today, James? So it could be something you've been through yourself, or it could be something you've seen, for instance, in the many clients that you help.
Sure. I don't know if I would use good or bad. One thing I like to do is I like to look at everything in a spectrum, healthy or unhealthy. And so with the history that I've had, so many patients I've had, I've worked with a lot of people who unfortunately have received probably not the healthiest version of therapy. So if a therapist comes in and has their own agenda and their own worldview, which may be different from someone else's worldview, and if I, for example, if I were to do that and put my morals, my standards, my idea of how you should live, unfortunately, that can really negatively impact my patient. So I've worked with a lot of people who have been through, unfortunately not the healthiest versions of treatment. And with that, it's kind of skewed the perception of who they should be or who they should not be. And so with that, that can be very detrimental. So one thing it's so important in my field, and anyone who may be listening to this, is you really want to ask yourself, why am I asking myself this question? Why am I asking them this question rather? Because if you find that you're asking them just because you're curious about something, or you find that you have your own personal agenda with that, unfortunately, that is it's a type of bias that you're bringing in. So kind of what I was saying earlier, when we have that ability to slow down and stop and think and say, what's my motivation, or why am I doing this? You'll find, whether it's the layperson or whether it's someone in my field, you'll find that it really helps us understand, is this a healthy question? Is this an unhealthy response? And so that's something that in my field, I've noticed that specifically when I used to teach with a lot of clinicians, that was one of the things I would do is for them to become licensed, they would have to come see me, work with me for 2 years, and I would approve them to be licensed. And so to really help people understand the nuances of types of questions you ask, whether it's an open-ended question, a closed-ended question, if it has a bias to it, you'll find that the more aware you are of that and slowing down, the more healthy you will be in helping any of the patients that come to you.
Fantastic. It's again really good advice and perspective. Thank you, James. This is an interesting one. Benefit of hindsight comes to mind. What advice would you give yourself around mental health 10 or even 20 years ago?
You know, it's funny. When I first started, I was 21. I think just the day after I started working at a group home, because you had to be 21. And so 21 years old, I'm working in this group home with kids who are boys, rather 13 to 17. So here I am, I have the biggest heart. I wanted to adopt all of them. I'm 21. What am I going to do? And so at that moment, it was so hard for me to understand what boundaries meant. And so with the boundaries, it was hard for me when I would leave the group home, because I would still think about them. I want to help them. But as the older I've become and the more experienced I am, I've learned to be able to take my clinical mindset and say, for this particular 50-minute clinical hour, or however long I'm working with someone in that moment, I will be present with them. But once I leave for my own mental health, it's important for me to kind of close that in my mind. And then now I'm James the person instead of James the clinician. And when I was younger, I struggled with that. And it was harder for me because, just like all of us, we have big hearts and want to help people. So that would be the biggest thing advice I would give myself, is learn how to compartmentalize, learn how to be present. But once you leave for your own mental health, it's to be able to separate and decouple that, and then be the person who you truly are, or perhaps work with another person as well. And so that was something. It took a couple years, but I was able to do it. And that's one thing I continually remind myself of if I do find that there's a particular patient or someone that I am working with who has maybe kind of pulls at my heartstrings a bit.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, James. Actually, that kind of feeds nicely into my next question, which was if you're happy to share some of your own top tips on how you nurture, protect, and grow your own resilience and mental health.
Mm-hmm. You know, I always tell people how you start your day is indicative of how your day is going to go. Mm-hmm. So for me, I break down my life into my spirit, mind, and body. People can break it down into their ego, id, super ego, however you want to do it. It's fine. Conceptualize it how you'd like. For me, I make sure I do something every single day. So in the morning, I've been blessed because I'm on the radio. I have probably about a 20 to 30 minute recorded affirmation and goals that I hear every day. So when I walk my dog in the morning, I'm listening to that. So it goes through my affirmations, it goes through my goals, it sets the agenda for me. And then I come back and work a little bit on my spirituality for about another half hour. And then from there, I will, depending on my schedule, I will then do some form of an hour of exercise. So I always want to make sure that all three components are always invested in every single day. So that is something that I make sure I do. It doesn't matter if I have a really long day, I will do some form of physical exercise, whether I feel like it or not. And so that's the way I reset for myself, is I take that time and that investment to work on my spirituality, to work on my physical aspect, and then also just as throughout the day, working on my intellectual part as well. So I think that when people are aware of what can they do every single day, what rituals do they create every single morning, and the structure that they have, they'll find that they can really exponentially grow and develop. But if we don't work on all aspects of our life, then unfortunately it will become unbalanced. And when we live an asymmetrical life, you'll find that you don't have the ability and the sustainability to tackle whatever the day may have for you. Mm. So that's one thing I do, is to find different avenues and different techniques with my morning rituals to be able to give me the resilience and the fortitude that I need for whatever may come my way rather.
Fantastic. So that's a brilliant advice there. And it's almost like start as you mean to go on, and really put yourself first thing in the day, and set yourself up for a really successful and a happy day. Brilliant. I love it.
Well, even to piggyback off that a little bit more is, and that may be how I start my day, but I also, the night before, I say, all right, James, you need to go to bed at a certain time. So if some days just like all of us, I may work like a 14-hour day. So if I know I have a really, really long day, I will make sure that I've really set my bedtime the night before to say, this is what is going to help me, because I do need to do my morning stuff. And so if I have to wake up at 5 a.m. to do that, then I will do that. But I want to make sure the night before, as I prepare for my next day, that I can be as anticipatory as possible, so that I still can maintain that structure for myself to be able to then execute whatever it is I have to do that day.
Brilliant. Very good. Thank you, James. Thank you very much. Any final advice or top tips you might share, particularly for someone who could be listening to our interview now, where they might have concerns about their own or the mental health of someone in their circle of influence, which could be a friend, a family member, a colleague, a teammate? What should someone do if they're in that position at the moment?
One thing I always tell people, specifically even with my brand, the name Lifeology, what that is it's a literary term which basically says it's a study of life. So we look at all people. Doesn't matter if you're considered a quote successful or quote unsuccessful person. We're all self-made. The choices we make today determines where we are in life. So with that, when I created Lifeology, I wanted people to understand that our life experiences may be different, but the emotions that we experience are all the same. It's universal. So what I would really help people realize today is you're not alone. What you may be feeling, it may feel like you're the only person who's ever felt that. Or it may feel like you are so isolated. And of course, fortunately right now, we are isolated in a lot of ways because of the quarantine. But when you are taking inventory in your own life, realize everyone else has felt some version of that. Maybe not to the extreme that you're experiencing, but that universal trait of the emotional experience we all have really links us together. So if you know someone who's struggling with something, really normalize that for them. Let them realize that what they're experiencing is very normal, very healthy. But the difference is that if you experience too much of anything, that's when it becomes detrimental. So creating the foundation of normalcy helps people feel like they're connected with someone else. And that creates a really good platform to say, okay, I agree with you in this. I understand this. I'm here. Now, what can we do to find a solution for it? So obviously the layperson won't know a lot of obviously things that people in my field know, but you can create an emotional experience that joins with them. And then you help them find a professional that can help them.
Yeah, amazing. Fantastic. Thank you, James. You've been so generous with your time and your advice and experience today. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
I know that our audiences will appreciate it. And I really wish you every continued success and good health. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Daryl. I appreciate it. Likewise.
Thank you, James.